Welcome. We are ready to start. As you can see, we've got a lot of people on stage and we've got very little time, but thank you for staying and I think picking up the threads from what we've heard about already this morning about what a new world order might look like and different perspectives on that.
Okay, so by way of introduction, my name is Jan Berger. I'm CEO and founder of Themis Foresight.
I'm Siv Helen Hesjedal. I was with Themis Foresight. I'm now with These Ways, a design company in Norway.
Right, and so last year we worked together on a project called Europe's Economy in a New World Order, where we tried to address global power shifts and how that could impact the European economy. We will not talk about the European economy today, only peripherally. What we do, however, want to address and want to talk about here is there's a huge disproportion currently in the world of power and representation, if we look at it. So just by way of introducing this, in 1913, on the eve of World War I, Europe's population was bigger than that of North America, South America, and Africa combined. If we look at the world today, 85% of the world live in what's called the Global South. However, in terms of power relations, nothing much seems to have changed. We're also looking at the development of GDP. By 2050, India will be on par in terms of GDP, not nominal, but purchasing power with the US. So combining those factors, it does beg the question, what will the future of global relations look like?
And I think what is important is that it is not just questions really of metrics like GDP and population, picking up from Thomas's presentation earlier, questions of ontology and epistemology, I think are also going to be important in that. So we're really asking, what might the global order look like 50 years from now? We have invited and put together in the last weeks and days, I think, a panel of 7 people from 7 different parts of the world who will be sharing their perspectives with us. We will have to be extremely strict on time, so you just have to bear with us. So let us stop rambling. Linda Groff, from having worked with really peace and future studies for a very long time from the US. Rosa Alegria from Brazil, working with Foresight, Teach the Future. So I look forward to also hearing about perspectives of the young people that you work with. Luke Tai is a founder of Cornucopia from Singapore. And Derek Woodgate, I think, a citizen of the world. Yeah.
Right. We also have Professor Yang Wang, Vice President for Institutional Advancement and Chair Professor of Mathematics from Hong Kong. We have Muammar Salameh, Director at that's a long one, Prince Mohammed bin Fahd University and then Center for Future Studies there in Saudi Arabia. And Thomas, yeah. Who we've just all heard, Ubuntu Futurist.
So we've asked our panelists, our colleagues, 3 questions about weights of history. What is weighing in your region, on your region? What are the pushes of the present towards a new world order? But also, what are you seeing in terms of hopes and aspirations that is pulling us towards what a new world order might look like? And that's really what we're going to ask you to talk about.
Right. So the first half of the panel revolves around this question. So Professor Yang, we heard a very impressive presentation already from China today, but basically in 2 or 3 sentences, what do you perceive as the biggest weight of history for China? And what do you also perceive as the biggest pull of the future of your country? Why don't you share that with the audience?
Perhaps I can start with the future. Okay, so I'm not an expert on history, but I've been thinking quite a bit about the future way forward. I think we're at a crossroad now. If you talk to audiences probably here and around the world, people are very pessimistic about the way the world is going. And China is often at the center of the discussion here, okay? But I'm actually an optimist, okay? I actually see that in the, I would say probably within 10 or 15 years, we're gonna see a much more united world order. And there is a there is a saying, there is a very famous novel called, historic novel called Romance of Three Kingdoms about, a long time ago, how the three countries at the time evolved. They fight each other and they align with each other, and it's very similar to what we see today. But the very first sentence in the book was 分久必合，合久必分. What that means is it says, if you're separate long enough, you're going to unite. And if you're united long enough, you're going to separate. And so we have seen unprecedented, this kind of cycle goes in history. And I think we're at the stage where we have separated, and it will continue for another, in my view, 7-8 years. On the other hand, I do see that in the end, people will realize that the current situation, whether it's the separation, this tension between the major powers in the US has not done good has not benefited anybody. In fact, I ask each of you in this room, you represent your country, has your country benefit from this global disorder, in my view, okay? And I think the answer is no for everybody here, okay? So that gives us hope that we'll come to senses. Anyway, that's my answer. I think I already said enough, but let's forget about history.
But that's fine. Well, that's a very, very nice kickoff. Thank you. Moving on to Myanmar, very different region of the world, Middle East, center of turmoil, center of fantastic development. Do you share that optimism? What's your perspective on weights of the past and pulls for the future?
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, I come from Saudi Arabia, but I am from Jordan, originally Palestinian. I want to talk about the Levant country and North Africa because, as we see, any Gulf countries are a stable country from many years. But about Levant country and North Africa, the most issues, most of their country, they were under European colonialism for more than 50 years. But still, till now, they are suffering from the consequences of the post-colonialism. Still, the people in their country is still suffering, is still not, and to be honest with you, still not believe of the European politics. When we are talking about optimistic, unfortunately, the people in their country, most of them pessimists. If you ask the young people in North Africa, in Levant country, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, maybe more than 50% of them, when you ask them about the future, they said they hope to immigrate. And what's the future? I am sorry to tell that, but this is the responsibility of Europe, because all of this, they are suffering from the post-colonialism. The other thing, I know the policy of WFSF do not touch the politics, but anything related to politics. The most issue in Middle East, the Israeli occupation, Palestine. And we are dealing with the occupation from international perspective as war between states. This is not war between states. This occupation and people defend their land. This protect from United Nations, from the Charter of United Nations. Each people has the right to self-determination. But why, when we are talking about Palestinian conflict, no, it's become terrorist. Last month, we have the issue between Ukraine and Russia. The European perspective, it was different than Palestinian and Israel. So how come the people, they will trust the international legitimacy and the international opinion. For that, when we are talking about the future of relation between Southeast and North, we see now the people in Arab world, most of them, they are going from China and Russia.
I think I'm going to interrupt you, Muammar, and move over to Linda. So weights of the past pulls towards the future. If you look at it from the US perspective, if I can dare say that, and maybe trajectory over the last 4 or 5 presidents. Big questions.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to honor all my colleagues here. This is a great panel. So in terms of the past and then what's pulling the future, I think one of the big issues in the world, and it's become a domestic issue as well as global, is how do all the racial, ethnic diversity of the world come together? And we've had conflicts, and in the US, we began without honoring citizenship and full citizenship to Black slaves, to indigenous people, and to women. Didn't get the vote till 1920. So that those types of things reassert themselves periodically. In other periods, we move forward and we get that we need to come together. I think humanity also organizes over time on a bigger system level. And I think the big challenge today is we're moving beyond the agricultural, the industrial, the information age into a whole new age. And none of us know totally what that new age is. You know, it has, and there's a lot of also, I think, existential issues facing humanity today, which include climate change, obviously, but also artificial intelligence and how we relate to that, and also how all our nuclear weapons are still a danger on the planet and get threatened periodically. And then also, how do we bring all our racial, ethnic diversity together is the big challenge. And it was interesting what you said, like maybe we're going to still continue with all this division within and between countries for the next 8 years or something. I don't know how long it will be, but we have to come back together, because if we don't, we're not going to be around. I'll just share one other quick little thing. There's a hypothesis. I have a panel tomorrow about is there intelligent life in the universe? The arguments about that. But there's this idea that maybe throughout the universe, intelligent life appears at different times and emerges. And then the critical thing is when any civilization then becomes a technological civilization and can begin to leave its home planet, has it evolved also its own consciousness in terms of how it relates to other beings and citizens in that country, so that they use that technology to then go out and become a spacefaring civilization. But if they take that technology and turn it against each other and end up killing each other, then they never get out to become a spacefaring community. So I think that's where we are as a human species today as well. And we have to come together or we won't solve all the issues facing all of us.
Yeah,
so.
Thanks. Thank you, Linda. Rosa, I want to invite you to share your perspective.
Okay, so thanks for the previous inspirations. I'm talking about Latin America. We have 400 years of colonization. It is not a short story. And this long story of colonization have imposed us a kind of pattern of exclusion. So we still maintain this pattern of excluding minorities, that are really not minorities. So we still maintain this. So our challenge is to escape and to leave this pattern, because it is a huge story that imposes us a pattern of exclusion. So exclusion is really one of the biggest challenges we have, but there are lights ahead, okay? There is a great movement now talking about the future, the colonizing futures, the Black people movements, the indigenous, and talking about the future, okay? So we have all resources to change, to make a shift in our position in the world, because now the world needs natural resources. So you have the largest part of diversity, water, energy, clean energy. So we have to take advantage of these, and talking about risks. Lack of food, lack of energy, lack of water is one of the main risks, and Latin America have the resources for this. And well, to make it short, a new kind of development should be raised. No, we still have a very, very wrong vision about development. Development was created after the World War, and the concept of development was created by the winner, and the winner still maintains. Development still means something, a landscape for the ones who have and the ones who have not. So we have to create a new kind of concept, a post-development model in which inclusion is really inclusion is really the key of the success of this. Okay.
Well, that was very clear. Let's move on to Luke. I mean, I find your perspective always enriching. Well, we've talked for that study because you have a very particular view on the ASEAN countries, in part also from your own research. And Rosa just mentioned food as an issue. Is that a matter in terms of weights of the past and pulls for the future, or other things overriding in your region of the world?
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you, Jan, again. So this is like a UN meeting, especially with the color of the furniture. So it can be long and boring, but I'll have a short intervention from my manifesto that I can't read because it's in my handwriting. Okay. So I think so the weight of the past, I think, is more obvious. And I think the imperialism, colonialism, and the grudges and resentment and revanchism that it has spawned is clearly one big issue along with the climate emergency. But let's move to the future. Speaking as a political scientist, structurally, I can see a few templated futures. You know, one would be bifurcation, which we seem to be in now. Another would be something more multipolar. The rise of the South is a big theme that is coming up. Singapore is a bit of a chameleon country because we're north, south, east, and west, depending on which suit we wear and which positioning and on what issue. Or it could be something even unipolar. And to me, frankly, calling a spade, I'm worried about the risk of major war. You know, and I think it's spin the bottle, who wins, you know. So if there's a major war, one exit point would be nuclear holocaust. Then arguably no one wins, neither people nor planet, right? But food security, mushrooms will win. Invest in mushrooms, you know. But if there is a substantial victory for one side, then that would be a unipolar trajectory for the future. Or we could go into a Mad Max type of future. I think more interesting lens would be in terms of hearts and minds of people. Will there be a secular change in people's views on sustainability and their own lives and consumption? You know, that's one, but that's not the only trajectory. One trajectory that can interweave and make things more pernicious is, I would say, race thinking, you know, moving forward. So for instance, you know, as someone who's gone to college in the US, you know, I think that America will be stronger if it can sort out its racial issues, you know, for instance. So that would be one critical uncertainty for me in the arm wrestle between the US and other great powers, you know, in terms of the appeal, hard power, soft power. Lastly, I think that the future of state-society relations is very key, because I think a lot of countries' big projects, hard power projects right now, may not be supported by the groundswell of the people. And this is a general comment, not to any one actor. You know, so are you on side or off side from the will of the people, you know, which can be mediated through democratic means? And I want to clarify that Singapore is a multi-party democracy with free and fair elections, and I'm proud of that. You know, or would it be mediated in some other way? So I think one of the key trajectories, especially managing the climate emergency and mobilization emergencies, would be to what extent does the state in different countries try to take more control because of a sense of crisis? The state has to take more control and stand up before it falls down. You know, the state in any place has its own perpetuating logic. So would that skew more towards state capitalism or towards state socialism? That's one of the uncertainties. Yep.
Okay. Derek, I'm looking at you as a former diplomat for Her Majesty's Foreign Office, and Europe kind of being caught in between a lot of these movements. How do you interpret the chances of Europe dealing with its own legacy, overcoming it, and moving into new futures? What do you see out there? What could be a pull for that continent?
Well, as a past diplomat, one thing I will tell you there's probably nothing that we're talking about now is in the minds of the people who are actually undermining everything we're talking about now. And that's one of the worst parts about this, right, is that having worked as a diplomat, finding that nothing you actually work on has anything actually to do with what's actually happening behind it all.
Could you move closer to the mic?
Yeah, sorry. Anything you're working on actually has nothing to do with what's actually happening in the corridors of power that are not necessarily actually directly related to the government. And that's a big issue. So we're not always talking here about how governments are playing. We're talking a lot of the time about non-state actors. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that faces, and certainly has faced Europe over the last few years, right, is not necessarily and new alliances. And we talk about new alliances in these global political alliances, but there are a lot of other new alliances like virtual cartels and things like that that are very much undermining what we're doing. And they're the types of things that actually those sort of groups that can be extremely dangerous. We currently have 32 wars going on in the world at the moment. It's not like there are 2 wars, the ones that we just talked about. But going back to what you said about Europe, I mean, Europe faces 3 specific things at the moment, right? That's the internal 27 country situation that we're always trying to bring together, the external threats, let's call them those, and then the third part being basically whether we're going to have a weak or a strong economy going forward. And that's sort of critical, right, to that. If you look at where this comes from and you talk about the past, I mean, one of the weaknesses today, obviously not during the colonization years and everything else people are talking about, is that we were the first or, industrialized countries. And when globalization happened, things moved away from here. We've not been able to replace with a lot of the high tech and innovation, for example, that the United States and China more recently has been able to sort of bring forward. And that's sort of leaving us a little bit out of that thing. In terms of the future, the frailty between the US-China situation leaves us in a very difficult position, right? Leaves in a position, one, we've been fully dependent on the US in terms of NATO for protection. If they were to pull out of NATO or move away from NATO, that would be problematic. Secondly, we'd like to think there's going to be at least a 3, if not a 4 sort of power structure in the future, right? Because that would leave us at least somewhere in the game. And I think that's the critical part for us at the moment. How can we, as Europe, with all the frailties of Europe, right? We're trying to bring together 32 nations, and in particularly the fluctuations in the political powers with individual states. Now we're currently in a very far right situation, right? We mean in the last 3 years, basically, we've moved very much to the far right. But that, equally 4 years from now, I could be sitting here and saying we've moved towards communism. Yep. And I think that issue, along with some of the internal issues like these sort of dreams of empires, right, of returning empires, Turkey, Hungary, a whole lot of them, really sort of put a dig in between what we're actually trying to achieve. However, overall, I'm pretty positive because I think that the whole issue of what is now Europe has been demonstrated, particularly through the Ukrainian situation, to actually work very, very strongly and come together. So we're actually, and also with COVID. Oh. So we have a fairly strong situation.
Good. I'm going to interrupt you there and and move to Thomas. And I think you spoke earlier about ways of knowing and ways of being. So maybe I will use that as a sort of leading, question to you.
Sure. The biggest weight on my region of the world has, as I mentioned in my presentation, been the effects of industrialization and how they've sort of accelerated rural to urban migration. And with that migration, we've seen a significant loss of indigenous knowledge that used to help us live more sustainably in our ecologies. And also at an individual level as well. Obviously, I'm talking now to the education that we receive is more or less been focused on, mastery education and understanding, the world from the Western perspective, whereas prior to that entire period of colonization, we had a more immersive sense of knowing and understanding. So I think going forth, as I mentioned, I tend to skew a bit optimistic and believe that futures will be localized just because of the geopolitical instability that has caused food insecurity. What's going to happen is that we're going to start seeing a lot more local communities coming together in camaraderie to build kinship and to sort of strengthen their own local economies in ways that are sustainable as possible, that really leverage, natural ways of producing food. But at the same time, there are still those existential risks that extend beyond, the natural environment. I'm now referring to neo-colonialism and recolonization within the digital realm. As we know, surveillance capitalism has grown significantly within the West, but there's still a big push to introduce these new technologies within Africa. Amazon's is launching this year. Google's building, I think, the biggest fiber cable that's coming into Africa. And that's obviously always done under the guise that it's coming to empower us and give us new opportunities to leverage these digital tools to build our own businesses. But in fact, we all know it's a different sort of commodity within the digital realm. They've pursued and exhausted the scorched earth policy of extracting resources. So the new oil is data. So even with this guise of, friendship that they're coming into Africa presenting, it's actually to extract within the digital economies as well. So my sense of local economies extends beyond just food security as well, but also into our own digital infrastructures and digital communities. I'm talking about wireless mesh networks. I'm talking about, like I said, universal knowledge ecologies, decentralized networks, but that are still able to communicate within one another to exchange ideas, exchange knowledges, and operate as a marketplace. So in that sense, power doesn't really belong to the nation state in that classical way that it has in the past. It becomes now more localized in such a way where people have a more participatory approach to democracy. Like I was mentioning, we call it letsema, that's mutual aid and cooperativism in Africa. And that's what I believe is more or less going to start happening within these rural, low infrastructure contexts.
Well, thank you. This was already like a super useful first round, because there are so many different concepts that sometimes seem perhaps mutually exclusive. So I want to thinking forward 50 years into the future, 2073. Maybe my question goes to Professor Yang. So we earlier heard today a very globalized view of the role of China in guaranteeing progress, development, stability. We also heard 3 speakers here talking about the importance of regional, localized economies to protect the local people and then pave the way for their development. Do you think that these 2 concepts of localization and globalization can go together and live harmoniously together in 2073? And if so, how?
Actually, this is an excellent question. You ask different people, you get different views. I mean, I have friends who are very anti-globalization. Okay, they simply believe that globalization only benefits the superpowers. And but on the other hand, if you look at the development of Southeast Asia, for example, okay, they actually benefit from small country like Vietnam. Well, Vietnam is not really that small, but it is. You look at Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, and others, they have also benefit from this wave of globalization. So I think in the end, we can definitely globalization leading to prosperity for everyone can happen. However, it cannot happen under the absolutely free capitalism. Okay, so if you, for example, if you like Thomas Piketty's book, 21st Century Capital, you could see a lot of the inequalities, including the place I'm come from, like Hong Kong. Okay, so it was absolutely clear that the free capitalism actually lead to greater inequality, and this logic applies also to the unregulated globalization. Okay, even though I am a big proponent of globalization, I do believe that there are certain rules should be in place. I mean, look at what happened today in countries like Haiti, for instance, are perpetual in the state of where they have food crisis, they have health issue, and countries in Africa have also experienced many years of this kind of disasters. So in fact, I was very interested in what you just mentioned about the decentralization, blockchain, technology, Web3. So this is also one of the area I've been promoting. So I love to chat with you a little bit. There are certain there are voices that talk about this. So I think anyway, my time is up.
No, I know. Obviously, the issues around colonialism was a theme from everyone across the table or across the panel, and also a lot of you spoke about issues of inclusion in different forms, but at the same time there was optimism, from almost from everyone. But I want to ask you, Rosa, about the if we look 2073, a more positive, a more inclusive future, what might that look like?
50 years ahead, for sure. If humanity has to survive, we want to survive, we have to create a new development model. Capitalism is under scrutiny, even by the economic system itself. So I think that the new development model, or whatever we might call it, should come from maybe the developing world, now the colonized world, because we have been hidden in history, and we have resources that are not being praised. One of them, I just told, the natural resources are not accounted in the national gross the national gross indicators, right? So this is something. And another subjective things like creativity, and talking about risks. One of the main risks is my vision. I've talked this some time ago in another conference. It's the hidden part is lack of imagination. We have to be creative to solve these multiple risks we are under. So Latin America is a very, very creative continent. And we are, despite our history, we are very positive. We are very optimistic. So subjective elements of the economy may arise as main aspects of the economy, not only materials. And this is what I see in the 50 years ahead. Okay, so the developing world will be praised from their aspects, unique aspects. Okay.
Derek, you said something that triggered something with me. One of the scenarios that we developed in our study, which when we talk to businesses seems to be the favorite scenario, is Europe as a middle power, i.e. To some extent, let's not, let's pull our troops out of Mali. Let's see if we can make other ways. So you were talking about Europe actually having an interest in seeing a multipolar world. What could European governments do to make that happen? I mean, Europe still does have some weight.
I mean, Europe still has a lot of power, right? I mean, if we look at the French-German axis in terms of industrialization, it's still a very, very strong,
right,
and is the area that's trying to integrate everything. So I think from that perspective, I mean, Europe really is still comes back to what you were saying before, is still living in the throes of the end of the Second World War, right? That's the actual baseline, I suppose you'd say, for where we are, and that hasn't changed, and it's not changing until we see these other players coming in. We're quite happy. I suppose we've been quite happy to be supported by the US predominantly. That's given us a sense of safety, whatever that means. Within the coming world, and particularly when you talk about 50 years out, I mean, we always talk about these global powers. I mean, there's no dominating power currently. I mean, that's been the major change in the last decade, right? That's what you'd say. That's one. But two, I mean, cyber security, virtual communities are one of the areas, if we look to the future, are going to be very, very strong, both politically and, moreover, from a anti-security perspective, right? So where you get groups, very large groups of people that can take out a complete security system, or are working with, nano drones and stuff like that actually carry nuclear weapons, they're the concerns that are a little different, right, from that which we have today. So it's a very, very different, it's very easy to look at traditional. If we look at traditional battlefields today, they're still very much about, you see it with both the current wars that we follow the most. It's still tanks and traditional things. But that's not actually, the big difference with that is it's all transparent, right? We watch the war as it goes on. But when you start to look at what's coming up, when you bring transdisciplinary sciences together, so nanobio, neuro, and so on and so forth, attacks will not be the same. When we talk about mind-to-mind and all these things, they're not the same types of structures of war, and so which we've seen with cyber wars, right, in recent years. So my concern is more that there will be completely different structures beyond state structures that we're used to that can incredibly disrupt all this, whether it's 3 or 4 powers. I think there are going to be a lot of other powers that are much more powerful than those powers even.
Muammar, I want to ask you, and I think this is very difficult in the midst of a deep crisis, right? But if you can manage to step 50 years into the future and maybe see what are the options and the possibilities for what the region might look like, and also in the context of our big power struggles in the world.
It's very difficult to imagine.
1 minute.
No, okay. In the first question, I was very pessimistic, but we are always, as Arab people, optimists. So because this is from our culture also to be optimistic. As I said, I talked about the 11 countries at North Africa, but when we are talking, for example, about Gulf countries, they are stable and they are very going fast, and like Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Qatar. But return to 11 countries at North Africa for the future, the main, we know the main issue always the situation, the conflict, Palestinian-Israel conflict. If it's resolved, we are going for a better future for the region itself, because also the countries around like Jordan, Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, also they are suffering from this conflict. But without the help from Europe and the United States, it will not be resolved. But also, we discussed yesterday with many colleagues, when we are looking for the future, we have to read the history. We have to read the history not just from our perspective, not from just our scholar. We have to read the history from their perspective, from the perspective of their peoples, to know the reality, to build in the future. And if we are looking for the future from the present domain, I think the future is not preferable future. But if we are looking for better future, we have to change many things right now, especially because many things connected to politics. We have to change, first of all, the Charter of UN. The Charter of UN, especially the Security Council, the regulation, they are talking from 30 years ago about the change of the regulation of Security Council, but till now, nothing happened. And I think 10 years later, nothing happened, but hopefully in the future, it will be changed. When it will be changed, maybe we will have a better future.
All right. Unfortunately, we started with a 25-minute handicap into this session, and other sessions will take place. Luke is moderating a session 10 minutes, 12 minutes from now. So we would have liked to explore also more this dichotomy, democracy versus autocracy, or, does it have to be a versus? Can it coexist? We would have liked to explore more innovation. Where is innovation happening? Is it going to continue to be in the global West, or actually where new industries arise in the global South? But unfortunately, we don't have the time. But I would like to put we would like to put one last question to each of you. We'll start with Luke, maybe 30 seconds. In 2073, the WFSF has contributed by doing the following things to arriving at a new global order. What's your view on that? What's your wishes for the Federation to address in the coming decades?
Yes, well, I think the best preferred structural outcome would be some sort of reglobalization, but along more ecological and humane lines. So I think the Federation can contribute both in terms of theory, but also praxis towards that. I think we need to have a lot of disarmament, although it sounds like a bit of a pipe dream, because we're already living beyond in an overdraft on our planetary limits. And just lastly, irrelevant word on Southeast Asia. I think the preferred future from my regional perspective, speaking as a Southeast Asian, would be if there can be, building on some threads discussed, more self-sufficiency up to a certain level, so as to be not so buffeted by the climate or other type of extra-regional global shocks that can happen. So if there can be more localism, different layers of sustainability, that would be preferred as well. Thank you.
Thomas, from your perspective.
Yeah, as I mentioned in my previous answers, it all comes down to pluriversal design. I think what the Federation can do is start setting up their own sort of framework for how these different knowledges can be accommodated for in a way that other people can make use of them. I think one thing that still separates us is obviously the type of academic institutions where we learn from. So in 2073, for the Federation to really have a strong contribution to the future that we want, it should have some sort of a repository of these different knowledges that other people from around the world can make use of. I mean, that's what Wikipedia and the internet were supposed to be, but unfortunately, it only serves a specific sort of region of the world in a specific way of inputting information. But I think as the web gets more decentralized, there'll be more opportunities for people to create their own infrastructures, these knowledges.
Linda, let's continue with you. We'll just go like this.
Okay, just quickly. I mean, I think one of the great visions for the WFSF, if we can get future studies in schools on all different levels and more widely accepted, and get people everywhere brainstorming for creative ideas to solve problems today. The other thing I want to say, I guess, is there have been a lot of global declarations where people from all over the world have come together to agree on common values that we need to support, and those are important. And then we have to see again how to apply them both globally as well as locally, so and honor the histories and cultures of different parts of the world so that they will work effectively, like democracy, for example. The other thing I want to say, I've done peace studies for years, and in the peace studies field, I've looked at evolving views of what is peace. But what's very fascinating is if you start different parts of the world, they start from different premises about peace. And if you start with indigenous, they always talk about peace with the earth. We have to take care of the earth, which is a whole sustainability issue. If you start with Easterners, they start with inner peace. We have to meditate. We have to find peace in ourselves and project it to the world. If you start with Westerners, they tend to start with take action in the world, outer peace forms of that. And justice questions. So what I think for myself is we have to draw on the wisdom of all the different parts of the world and figure out how to come together and honor that and learn to listen to each other so that we can hear each other and learn from each other as well.
All right, we need to speed this up. Others are itching to get to their panels. Derek, you're itching too, right?
Yeah, very quickly. I actually agree with those elements. Sorry, I agree with them. Those elements. I mean, I wish we could sort of use all the benefits of the innovative sort of creative aspects that we have within WFS, and we could be a think tank that would actually definitely replace the UN, that actually has never been particularly innovative in anything it's done, mainly for a lot of the political in-playing. But we need something that sort of somehow gets around a lot of that, in-playing and alliances that actually are formed within the UN and actually get some results from it all.
All right, one more.
I agree with Derek, and I also yesterday was thinking about this, and in the future, why WFSF not become also as a member in UN as also, hopefully in the future, WFSF will play a main role in the war to be advisor also as a national organization, to be advisor for the others, to give benefits for their research, for their studies, and for the better future always.
Professor Yang?
Yeah, actually, in every place I've been to, in every meeting, future of X has been the topic of discussion. So I think we are in very good position. The climate change has been one theme that unites the whole world. I think the attention to the future, it will be another theme, and our federation can play a major role in uniting the world.
Thank you. Rosa?
The federation is becoming more and more diverse, okay? And it was more Eurocentric, and it's in a movement, and to be more global, and I can see, like Linda says, many representations. And the two things, I see in 50 years, the educational system being transformed, being under transformation through the federation influence, okay? Because we will promote futures literacy in all educational systems. And second, the political systems will be really integrating committees of the future more and more. Okay, so this is my scenario.
Thank you. As a board member of the Federation, just to say thank you, really, I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for agreeing and being part of the discussion. So we just